Ladies and gentlemen, from VMware, please welcome Mahesh Kumar and John Herlocker. And from NetApp, please welcome Tim Russell.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. How is everybody doing? Awesome, awesome. That's what I want to hear. It's day one, exciting times at VMworld, and glad you guys chose to be here for this session. I promise you, across the three of us, there's really some good, cool stuff, good, great technology that you can actually go back and start using immediately. So we'll showcase that, show you how it works, how simple it is to use, but more importantly, show you the strategy and the rationale behind how we are tying it together to bring out the cloud management piece. Okay? My name is Mahesh Kumar. I'm Director of Product Marketing for vCenter Operations, as well as Log Insight, which forms the bulwark of cloud management for us. And I'll let these two gentlemen here introduce themselves. John?
Great, thank you, Mahesh. I'm John Herlocker. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Log Insight product. I also manage all engineering and have some of my awesome team here watching. Yeah, I guess that's good enough. You'll hear more from me in a minute.
Great, thanks, John. I'm Tim Russell. I lead an incredibly talented team at NetApp that drives our integration with VMware and provides all the value of the NetApp storage system into the VMware environment.
Does great work, too.
Thank you, gentlemen. So before we get started and dive deep into log analytics, let's actually take a look at why VMware is in the space to begin with. What are we doing with regards to management itself, why we need to be in that space and be looking at it, how unique is that compared to what you might have encountered in terms of traditional management systems, right? So that's what we'll do with the software-defined data center and our approach to cloud management. I'll hand it over to John, who will then walk through all that we're doing in terms of log analytics, the VMware approach, a quick walkthrough, if you will, with screenshots showcasing what the product has to offer. And like I promised, we'll have a real-life example of how we are quickly partnering with folks like NetApp as well as others to bring value to our joint customers. Okay, so our approach to management is a purpose-built approach for the cloud and the virtual era. Okay? It relies on the notion that the traditional approaches to management, which were really steeped in having this brittle infrastructure in a siloed fashion, where IT was carving out both the infrastructure, the app components, as well as the management tooling in vertical integrated silos, is not tenable for the cloud era. Okay? Why so? Hey, first of all, there is an extreme wastage of resources. Second, you have multiple touch points of failure. Third, you build these silos across your IT, and pretty soon you need a manager of managers to assume management of those individual pillars. Okay? What changes with regards to cloud is, A, it's dynamic. You know, you all have heard of vMotion. You can pretty much move your VM anywhere you want. It's not necessarily tied down to a particular server. Second, the speed and the scale of changes that occur within most environments today relies on the notion that management is oblivious to where things are attached. Okay? And lastly, most of our customers we are seeing are already on that path to a heterogeneous hybrid cloud environment. And so all of those require a completely different approach to management, one that relies less on coupling, vertical coupling, but is more at ease when it comes to abstracted pools of resources in terms of the infrastructure that it is managing, as well as the applications which ride on top of that. Okay, so how do we do that? Our goal at VMware, you know, we've been on this management journey for more than 3 years at this point, and our goal has still been about simplification and automating IT management. I'll digress here a little bit. There's an extremely good video out there by a doyen when it comes to networking. Scott Schenker, I suggest you take a look at it. And in that he talks about, so this is a PhD professor from UC Berkeley, and in that he talks about this notion of you can continue to master complexity, or you can choose a path which abstracts simplicity out of a system, and then you interact with that simplicity. Doesn't mean extracting simplicity is easy. It could be equally hard, if not harder, But the idea is that you can choose to build and make things more and more complicated. Sure, you can get certified on different systems, or you can work with abstracted notions of simplicity, which are very easy to use, and get you to do your job quickly. So our approach to management is similar. It's about how can we simplify things, how can we provide that time to value quickly for our customers so that when they are focused on running their infrastructure, they're not bothered about the complexity of the tooling which is supposed to help them run that infrastructure or application. And so from that notion of simplicity then, we extend it out to make it a truly multi-platform, multi-cloud management system. So across multiple hypervisors, across private and public clouds, across constructs of physical as well as virtual, that management tooling has to work seamlessly. Okay. Whoops. All right. So with that in mind, the key solution areas that we bring to the table can be distilled across 3 distinct layers. First is cloud automation. If you look at the software-defined data center, you virtualize networking, compute, storage, and services. There's got to be an easy way to consume that. I, as a developer, may want to deploy a LAMP stack. Somebody else coming in might want to deploy a full-fledged application, or somebody just wants a naked VM landed on their infrastructure. So how do I provision these services? From an IT perspective, how do I create or author this catalog of services that I can expose to somebody who's trying to consume them based on their role in the organization? That's really what cloud automation is about, and we have products and technologies that allow our customers to quickly set up a private cloud where they can start deploying apps into their infrastructure. The second piece then becomes about managing that infrastructure or application through its life cycle. What kind of SLAs are being expected of that infrastructure? Do you have capacity for that particular workload to function like it is doing today? How about capacity in the future? Are you going to hit a brick wall on storage, for example? Those are things you ought to know sooner and before they actually occur, right? So with operations management, what we're trying to do is provide that deep insight all the way from application into the infrastructure and help our customers see real-time what's happening across those layers and take preventive action, okay? And that's an area where we have recently added Log Insight. So whereas in the past, a lot of you are probably familiar with vCenter operations, which was looking at millions of metrics, both from vSphere as well as other external monitoring tools, and correlating those to provide a unified view of the data center, that was still being done for structured data. And what we are doing with Log Insight now is extending the scope of that essentially to pull in all of machine data, all of the unstructured data in the environment, so you get the true picture across your infrastructure and application. Okay? And John will be getting into the details of that. The last pillar I wanted to emphasize is around cloud business management. And really, this is about providing that CIO level view. What is the cost of your infrastructure? What is the cost of services that you allow within your data center or even consume from outside? How are the vendors that you're sourcing from stacking up in terms of the SLAs they provide, for example? Or better yet, if you're a utility company, can you compare your performance, your IT performance, to that of a competitor or a peer in that same vertical and come to a decision as to whether you're doing better than them, equal, or worse, right? So having that high-level view of how IT is performing for you is very important and critical and really ties all of this together, okay? So how does that tie to the software-defined data center? Well, the easiest way to look at this chart is everything below the blue or below the midline is infrastructure virtualization, right? So you have compute, storage, network, other services. But then to make it useful, you go up a level, you put that management top hat. And that's exactly what we discussed in the previous slide, really looking at how do I provision to that infrastructure, how do I land apps, how do I do app release automation if I'm in DevOps, for example, how do I take care of day 2 operations management across performance, configuration, compliance, capacity, and so on. How do I run IT like a business, right? So those boxes at the top are really the management constructs, the control points, if you will, that allow us to provide our customers that core capability of managing their software-defined data center. Okay, so now diving deeper into that second pillar around cloud operations, what is that really? It's a behavior analytics engine which is purpose-built for operations management in this day and age. It provides our customers the visibility all the way from application to infrastructure, and it does it in an intelligent fashion. So there's no notion of static threshold. The tool actually sits in the environment, learns from all of the metrics that it gathers in a time series fashion, correlates those, draws up its own conclusions of what a dynamic threshold for a particular metric ought to be in that environment. Uses that, generates smart alerts. Much different than all the other tools which work in a static-y fashion and would generate thousands of alerts if some arbitrary pseudo high watermark were to be breached. The second thing it does is around automated policy-driven management. And essentially, that's around being able to kick off workflows, if you will. So kick these workflows off to take remedial action because it sees there are issues fermenting within the infrastructure. Okay? And then lastly, a key tenet is around unified management. What is that unification? It's a troika, actually. Number one, you want to look at the disciplines of performance, capacity, and config together. There may be an issue with future capacity which might drastically affect the SLA that you can deliver to your customer. So you better be looking at those two together. There may be a patch or a config change which again affects performance. So you better have a good way of correlating those as well, right? So that is one unification. The second unification, more and more, is around knowing everything soup to nuts, application to infrastructure. I need to know what's happening in the storage layer because that's potentially affecting the QoS that I deliver through a particular web application to my end customer. And oh, by the way, some of that information is captured in structured data. Some of it's hidden, buried somewhere in unstructured log data. How do I grab both of them, tie it together, and paint a coherent story as to A, what's potentially happening, or what happened, a postmortem, right? So it's very important to realize that we are doing this across multiple vectors. The last piece around unified management is really then taking that and saying, can I extend this to other hypervisors? Can I extend it to physical constructs in the data center? Can I extend it to public clouds? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes, right? You can take this tooling, and it's capable of looking at your virtual machines on a different cloud, a different hypervisor, pulling in logs from non-VMware sources, NetApp, for example, as we'll see later, and correlating all of those to make sense of what's happening within your environment, okay? Whoops. I think the clicker's been, all right. So I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on Log Insight and what it is. So this is really the new log solution I was alluding to earlier, which we introduced earlier this summer. This thing works on autopilot. Okay, I'm going to leave it here. Okay, so what we are providing with Log Insight is really the capability to start looking at this unstructured machine data. You point it to a source, grab that data. Let's say it's vSphere data. We have content packs for other sources as well. And you start looking at that using smart parsing tooling, as well as a very extremely easy to use interface, and you start making sense out of unstructured data, okay? From our standpoint at this point in the product's evolution, we are obviously looking at binding it with operations management, right? It's yet another tooling that helps you look at what's happening at the machine data level. Doesn't mean that there aren't other uses that we're working on. Clearly, as you can see, there are other areas that we can start leveraging this technology, and that's what we are looking to do in the future, okay? Okay, so before I hand it over to John, just wanted to talk about that deeper integration with vCOps and what it means. In a nutshell, for those who are more technically minded in this audience, I can leverage Log Insight to deliver alerts within vCOps. So what on a dashboard would have been a time series of structured data of KPIs and metrics that vCOps is correlating, now within that same timeline, you can start looking at some of the unstructured data and what's happening there, and key event-driven logic is piped into vCOps. Conversely, I can point to any object within vCOps and then open up in context the log data for that, as well as the insights and the analytics that the tool is providing for that particular object. So it goes both ways, north and south, essentially ties up a good story for us. Okay, so I'd like to invite John up on stage to walk you through the log analytics problem as we see it, as well as the VMware approach, and then a quick walkthrough of how the product actually works. John?
Great, thank you. It's like magic, it just turned on. Thank you. Great, so I am super excited to be here. Actually, this is my very first VMware presentation, so it's very, very humbling for me. Glad you all came to listen. So today I have, I guess, 4 goals. First, I want to start by talking about, why log analytics. Why you should be thinking about log analytics, why you should be implementing it, why you should consider implementing it. Then I want to talk about why VMware chose to invest in log analytics at this time and place. Second, I want to geek out with you a little bit on the technology front and talk about our approach to log analytics from sort of a technology perspective. And of course, that's where we'll have the most fun as the CTO. And of course, need to kind of give you a quick sort of preview, highlight some of the cool features of version 1 of Log Insight, which just came out earlier in July. And then I guess finally, fourth, I want to sort of through the presentation give you an idea of the kind of capabilities you're going to see coming out of the Log Insight team over the next year or two. So, Log Insight's in its V1 first release, so you can kind of see what's there, but I also want you to have a feel for what's coming, and so I hope that you get that out of the whole presentation here. Fantastic. All right, so why is VMware investing in log analytics now? Well, let's start with the basics, right? Log analysis is central to IT operations. If you've ever been someone managing an IT operation of any complexity, you've spent time looking at logs, trying to figure out what's happening. So traditional monitoring systems that collect metrics are great at helping you understand that something's wrong, right? Like this is a chart that I was looking at one of my storage arrays, and my latency was going incredibly high. The question is, why is that happening? Log analytics is really the key and sort of, often the only way that you know why something is happening. Why did this cascading failure kick off? Like, what were the steps along the way that caused it to happen? And so in this case, why is my storage slow, right? And if you look at the logs here, it turns out had a hard drive failure in one of my disk arrays. Now that was not an error that gets propagated up to the application, and it's not necessarily an error that I can sort of infer by looking at this metric chart, but it's in the logs, right? And so having access to those logs allows me to sort of, get to the root cause. Now this is not new, right? We've been, logs are sort of, we've been using logs to get to root cause analysis since we all learned to use printf when we were writing C programs as developers. Can we go back a slide, please? I'll put that down. But there's a huge opportunity here that if we can make it easier, faster for you to find that root cause, we can help you discover those patterns and trends in your logs that are sort of giving you a hint of future failures, right? That we can help you identify those sort of low-lying, like minor failures that are slowly eroding away at the performance of your infrastructure. If we can do that better for you, there's a big win. But another reason is that, what I found from my own experience as at various projects at EMC and VMware was that logs were in all of these different silos. So you'd have logs from your ESX over here, you'd have logs from your Windows applications over here, you'd have logs from your Linux over here, but in the end, you're generally offering a solution, an application that depends on all of those. And when there's a failure in your application, it could have happened at any one of those places. And so now you kind of have to sort of SSH or remote desktop into all these different places to look at logs. And so there's a real need to collect the logs together in one place and to have technology that makes that easy, but also can handle the scale. But really, the big thing that really got me started on this project in general was some thinking. I used to be CTO of Mozy. We used to have we had up to 100 petabytes of storage that we stored people's backup data, huge sort of distributed systems. And my experience as CTO of Mozy was, wow, debugging issues is getting very complicated. It's not like it used to be anymore, right? And it's not getting complicated in sort of a linear way, right? It's not like, every year maybe, you get a little more complicated. I felt like actually the kinds of issues that we had to resolve at Mozy and the kind of issues that I found customers of EMC and VMware running into were like dramatically more complicated than the ones that they were dealing with 5 years ago. And so, three reasons for that that I want to address, basically talk to today. Now, there's probably a variety of different reasons, but let me focus on three. So one of them is, and this is something we experienced at Mozy a lot, was increasingly distributed architectures. So, in the old days, you'd have one server, right, that was active at a time. There was no concurrency or very minimal concurrency. There was only one core. And so, we've been slowly adding more cores. But what I really saw at Mozy was a game changer for me. I went from having maybe a cluster of size 1 or 2 to clusters with 1,000 nodes in them, right? And all of these clusters were running these incredibly complicated algorithms, right? These, distributed ordering algorithms, distributed voting algorithms, right? Algorithms that were designed to try and deal with all these hairy corner cases, network partitions, server failures, right? And the reality is, they don't actually deal with all of those hairy corner cases all the time, right? And so when they don't, you have to debug that. And it's way, way, way harder, right? Exponentially harder than debugging single processor cases. This is one of my main insights I had. Corollary to that was just the scale. I went from sort of operating services that were maybe 5 or 10 nodes to, as I said, ones with thousands of nodes. And now I had, instead of like 5 different nodes with logs on them, I had 1,000 different nodes, each with separate sets of logs, but they were operating a single service, which meant that failures kind of required you to sort of follow details in logs, reconstruct details in logs, sessions across all of those log things. And so there were just more of these nodes, and they were spewing even more data in order to compensate for the complexity. We've got more verbose with our logging, and so there was an increased scale of logs. Another thing that I kind of have observed, particularly with VMware, is we're adding all of these layers to our stack. Right? There's more layers of virtualization than there used to be. Well, you heard about NSX. Well, we're virtualizing all the network. And you heard about vSAN. Well, we're virtualizing that too, right? All of these new layers of virtualization that are being added. Now, these layers of virtualization are awesome. I have to say that because I'm with VMware. But no, they add a lot of sort of flexibility. They add a lot of agility. They make things more maintainable. It's all goodness. But they also make debugging more complicated. Now, you guys probably have experienced that. You're all VMworks experts. But just think about it, right? Essentially, at any failure in the stack, right, could cause the whole solution or session to fail. But errors don't really propagate up so well, through those layers of virtualization. Take that storage example we had earlier, right? the application I'm running doesn't get notified that a disk has failed in the storage array, right? That piece of information gets swallowed up at some layer. And so, by adding these layers, you're also adding these sort of filters of information, but you kind of need to know when these failures happen, what that information is. And so that increases the complexity of debugging these issues. So, I guess, that was really the big point that kicked off this project, was this realization that we need some solutions to this sort of increasing complexity. Boom. And so what does this all kind of, it starts to reduce down to this one issue, which is that logs are becoming a big data problem, and a very important big data problem. Just an example, one customer we were talking to, they said, well, we're getting about 1 terabyte of logs a day, and this is like just this part of the infrastructure over here. And this is not even our customer with the largest volume of logs. There are customers that generate a lot more than this. And I was thinking about that. Like, how do I tell a story of how big that is? And I said, well, how did I do log debugging when I was an IT guy? grep, right? That was what I did for you techies. And so grep is sort of the classic Unix tool that people use to search to say, hey, did this particular string, this event occur in the logs on this particular day? So I found a computer and I got 1 terabyte of data and I ran grep for a string and I said, well, how long? Well, it took an hour, right? An hour, that's just one day of logs, right? Traditionally I want to look over a week or, several days or whatever. And also, if you've never done log analysis before, it's not as simple as I run one query and go, oh, I'm solved, I figured it out, hey, it's more like I look and I'm like, oh, that's not right, and then I try something else and I try something else and I try something else. Well, every iteration is going to take you an hour with 1 terabyte of logs. So, big data problem here that really needs to be solved. How do you find that needle in the multi-terabyte stack? So, as a technologist, the answer is clear. We need technology, right? We need technology to handle the scale of next-generation log volume, right? Straightforward. We have this big log data problem. We need to somehow have the ability to collect all that log data, and we need to analyze it, and we need to do it in a way that removes complexity instead of adding complexity. This is a little pet peeve of mine. I can't tell you how many versions of shelfware I have had of software products. And so my goal was to create something that was extremely simple to implement, extremely simple to prove that it worked, and from an operational perspective, remove the complexity and got you to the information, the insights you needed easy, quickly, without an entire team of consultants. And then number 3, I've been talking a lot about IT operations management, but I can tell you from my experiences in my previous roles that we got a lot out of logs. That was a lot more than just, is my system healthy, right? Our logs gave us a trace of what our customers were doing, right? What were they backing up? How often were they backing up? When did they back up? How large were their backups, right? There's enormous amounts of customer information embedded in that log data that did not exist anywhere else. Now, we had a business intelligence team, and, we did track some of these statistics, and generally the way it worked is I would call the BI team as a technologist and say, hey, I'm really interested to know, answer this question about our customers, right? Because I needed to sort of prioritize features. And they would say, that's great. We're so busy right now that we're not working on anything unless the CEO tells us it's the most important thing. Okay, well, I call the CEO, and he would call them. And then about 3 months later, they would have a report for me that would tell me the answer, right? And so, what we really want to do is say, hey, there's this amazing latent value in these logs. How do we enable it for you? And how do we remove all the friction that exists today to get you those kind of answers? And so we want to build a platform that goes beyond just operations management, but really sets the stage for answering even greater business-related questions about your IT infrastructure that you can sort of extract out of your IT infrastructure. All right. So now let's talk about some of the tech details. How do we go about building this technology? What are some of the key features of what we have built here? So let's start with architect from the ground up for big data. So we built this, we realized that the problem was huge amounts of data. So we had to build a system that could handle huge amounts of data, right? Let's see how this build out works here. Can we just build out that bottom thing all the way? Perfect. And then one more. Perfect. All right. So how do we do this? Scale out to massive workloads, right? We did some initial testing. It was immediately clear that a single node, compute node, was not going to be able to handle the kind of multi-terabyte per day log volumes that we were seeing with our customers. And so we had to build one of those distributed architectures that I talked about. I am nowhere near the clicker. That is awesome. It's over there. Maybe if I just wave at it. We needed to build a system that I could just easily add additional nodes to the system as an operator, and every time I add a new node to the system, I increase my ability to ingest data, right? So the ingestion is spread across the various nodes in the data. I add a new node, I get more ingestion. Also, query performance, right? Add more nodes, I can sort of use parallel processing to decrease the time in which I can get to answers over very large numbers of, very large quantities of data. So we did a lot of cool stuff. And in addition to kind of the basic big, in order to make things work on a big scale, you can sort of, well, I add new nodes and that, increase my ingestion scale out and certain queries will get faster. But it turns out it's a little more complicated than that, right? There's some questions you want to ask about your data that aren't as simple. You can't just break it up into 10 subqueries that run, right? There's a lot of sort of sharing of data that has to happen between those nodes. They have to sort of transfer huge amounts of intermediate data in order to get to answers. And so we've done a whole bunch of just cool stuff. Examples is we've come up with probabilistic implementations of certain aggregation functions. Okay, that's a seriously geek out term. But, I'm the CTO, what do you expect? What does that mean? That means there's certain queries that would just be very hard to answer if you went for the exact answer. But if you say, you know what, I don't need the exact answer. I'm okay if it's just an approximation. And where that approximation is within like a very tiny percentage of error of what the real value is. And when you apply that approximate algorithm, suddenly I can do that query 10 times as fast, right, with 10 times less communication, right? So we've done a bunch of really high-end stuff, right, to make big data work, I guess, better than it would in a traditional environment. And there's just a bunch of other stuff that we do to make big data work well, right? It's not something you may think about, but incremental data, right, incremental results. If you're asking a query over like 10 terabytes of data, well, it's going to take some time to get an answer, but it's great if you can start to see what the answer looks like right away, right? Because it's all about incremental exploration. So if you can start to see what the answer looks like, a lot of time you go, oh, I see where it's going, right? I can stop. Or I can see where it's going and it's not the question I want to ask. Let me go tweak that query a little bit and ask something different. We have top to bottom query cancellation so that you can at any point in time tweak your query. Your query is canceled, all the resources are freed up, immediately starts working on your new one. This is actually pretty challenging to implement, top to bottom. So there's a lot of just high-tech stuff that we've done to make scale out big data things work really well. All right, next big thing that we've done. So, okay, we build this infrastructure. It's really great at collecting large amounts of data. It's great at helping you kind of answer large queries. But how do you really get value out of that? Part of what, and I'll do a quick demo, I will show you some examples of how this works later, is we wanted to build a system that takes this unstructured data, right? And we wanted to make it as friction-free as possible to get from that unstructured data to an actual answer or an insight, right? You remember my story about calling BI and 3 months later actually having an answer? We wanted to change that, right? We also wanted to remove all the upfront work where you sort of, to get data into your system, right? How many of you guys know ETL, the term ETL? Let's see. Hands here, we've got a few of them. Okay. Yeah, ETL equals pain, right? It's basically the idea that, okay, I want my data in this format, but it's actually in this format, so I have to write all these parsers and things to kind of munge it so that it gets over here. And sometimes I do it right, and usually I hire somebody else to do it, and usually they don't do it right, and then things are bad. Anyway, really painful, creates a high cost to import data into systems. We want to just do away with that. We want to say, you know what? Your data, take it as it is, raw text, stuff it in, don't do any more. And yet, at the end, somebody can walk up to that system and get something like you're seeing on the right, right? They're not seeing plain text. They're seeing a chart, a graph, a visualization. They're seeing the insight that they need without having a bunch of consultants coming in and helping you sort of do your ETL or even helping you construct the query. And so the question is, how do you do something as magical as take unstructured data and let people answer structured queries on top of that? That's the magic. All right, so I'm going to show you a screenshot or two later to give you an idea of the magic. Okay, we've created this tool that's great, interactively allows you to query large amounts of data, allows you to put in unstructured data and answer structured queries and create nice little dashboards and reports and get your insights. But it's still interactive, and if you have massive amounts of data, it can still take you a lot of time to sort of say, well, what should I be looking for? What should I be searching for? What's actually in that information that I should be looking for? I know that once I kind of know what I'm looking for, the system will get it to me quickly, but what should I be looking for? Or, I have a query that returns 100,000 results. What's in those results, right? So we actually believe that it's incredibly important and the core of what we were doing to create this platform for automated statistical analysis. And that's a big word, another big word. But what does that mean? That means, we're applying we're letting the computer do the things that we as humans aren't very good at, like reading huge amounts of things, counting very large numbers, computing probabilities, et cetera. We can essentially have the software grind through all that unstructured data with all that nice, cheap computation you have and extract out patterns. Patterns in a way that are useful to you to make sense of the data. And there's three things I like to talk about. I mean, there's a variety of different patterns you can extract and things you can do and workflows you can trigger, right? But a couple that I find I like to talk about that are very relevant to operations management are summarization is one of them. So what does that mean? Okay, I got 100,000 results. Can you break that down for me a little bit, right? A lot of times when you have an incident, you see this massive spike in events, right? Because things are failing, you're getting lots of error messages, right? Okay, I have this, but that's way more than I can look at. I can maybe look at 50 or 100 or 150, but well, are those representative of the, it might completely change at 151 to something different. And so if I could say, just summarize this for me, right? Summarize these events, summarize this day, summarize yesterday, summarize this week, et cetera. That would provide a huge amount of value to me as a human being to help understand the raw data with the assistance, the augmentation of the software. Prioritization, another huge one. Okay, I got a lot of data, got a lot of signals, I got a lot of visualizations. But what should I focus on, right? Like, where should I apply? I'm a human being, I have a limited amount of attention. I'm trying to reduce the cost of my IT operations, right? I want to have, my ratio of admins to servers. I'd like that to go down. Prioritization is what it's about. There's a variety of ways you can leverage statistical analysis to do prioritization, right? You can look at anomalies, right? What's different? Like, hey, every day it looks like this, but today it looks different. vCenter operations, we already have a bunch of fancy algorithms that do this for numeric statistics. We're looking to do this with unstructured data. You can look at correlation, right? This is a big one. You're going to hear from Tim about NetApp and how they brought a content pack to us for log data around NetApp. Well, we can correlate logs that happen in the hypervisor with logs that happen in your storage array. And if things are happening at the same time, well, that's even more interesting than if they're kind of out of sync. If you see a bunch of correlated things in different places all go wrong at the same time, that tells you something a lot more. Prioritization. You should go look at that first. You know, and prediction is kind of the next big thing. It's like, okay, now the system is looking at those patterns in your data and maybe predicting where things are going. Hey, it looks like, you know, you're going to go off the cliff here pretty soon. Again, we've had that in for some numeric metrics using Capacity IQ and vCenter Operations Manager, but, you know, we're looking to add that for unstructured data as well. So I certainly believe that these kinds of automated statistical analysis, they are really the future of operations management. They're the way to help with that steep curve in complexity. They are the way that's really going to reduce that down. And this is one of the areas that we're making a big investment in. All right, so I kind of geeked out a little bit there. I apologize. You know, you're lucky I didn't start repeating Bayes' theorem to you or anything like that. But I don't want you to think that we've forgotten the basics, right? You guys are all VMware customers, or and you purchase VMware products, so the best VMware integration, right? We want so out of the box with V1, Log Insight integrates with vSphere, vCenter Operations Manager. So if you have vSphere, you deploy the VM, Log Insight will automatically configure your ESXi host to send their logs to Log Insight. So without any sort of manual configuration on your part. Mahesh kind of referenced the integration with vCenter Operations. I will actually show you a few screenshots of that later. But that's just the beginning, right? We're just getting started. If you look in the Solutions Exchange, you're also going to see content packs for View, NSX, Nicira, et cetera. And we're going to see more and more content built in, and we're also going to see more and more of that automation of collecting those logs. And so this is a key part of our goal, our approach. And we're going to hear more about this later, but a key aspect of log management is we give you the awesome technology, right? That's what Log Insight is. But there's still a knowledge aspect, right? A log message communicates something. There's semantics to it. Sometimes what that log message communicates is obvious. Other times, not so obvious, right? Our people in engineering who write these log messages are not part of marketing, and so they don't quite, appreciate the communication thing quite as well. But and sometimes it's harder to understand what those things mean, and also it's sometimes challenging to say what's interesting to look at in the, okay, I kind of understand these log messages, but what are the general trends I should be looking for, et cetera. And so we see a huge place for partners to come in who understand what their logs means and how they can be leveraged, and to have that just package that knowledge up and be able to, for you to inject that into Log Insight. And so right out of the bat, you are getting sort of great value for your integrations with those different solutions. And it's not just partners we're working with. We're actually designing Log Insight so that the product itself can be used to build these content packs, right? So you literally just use the product, you build these awesome dashboards and alerts and correlations and et cetera. You document them, you link them to knowledge base entries, et cetera, and then you just say, hey, export this, right? And then you can upload it to the Solution Exchange and other people can take advantage of it. So we're putting a lot of effort into that piece as well, too. All right. So now, some of you have used Log Insight. Some of you haven't. So I don't really have time to give you a full-fledged demo, although I could go on for hours on that. So I'm going to give you just a really quick glimpse of Log Insight, VMware vCenter Log Insight, and some of the key features. Now, there's a lot to it, so I can't show it all to you, but these are just a few of the key features. All right, let's start with the basics. You can search millions of messages in seconds with Log Insight. Super fast search with autocomplete. How do we do this? We ingest your data. We do proprietary indexing on this. So we are not based on Hadoop. And you're probably thinking, is this Hadoop-based? No, it's not Hadoop-based. It's not based on any open source database engine that you've ever heard of. We have hired some of the best architects, engineers we could find, and they have built something that's better, faster, and because we sort of own the top to bottom stack, we can do all sorts of cool optimizations. You know, searching is straightforward. It's like web search for your data, you know. But there's more to that. You can understand the trend over time, right? You know, you can see kind of, you know, patterns. Is this message increasing? Is it decreasing, right? Is it spike at a certain time? On the right, you can break down by attribute values. And I'll talk about this a bit more in the next few slides. But, you know, we talked about taking unstructured data and slowly adding structure to it, right? Well, those structures are like columns in a SQL table. Like once you have that structure, you can start to break down. You can sort of say, hey, okay, I've got, you know, whatever, 10,000 results here. Can you summarize that by this field on the right with one click, right? And all this is super fast. And these fields on the right, we'll talk about them. They're not necessarily manifested in the database. They're computed on the fly in many cases. But this is sort of an interactive analytics view that allows you to very quickly kind of explore your data, understand what's there, and get to the root cause. All right, so let's talk about one of the key features here. Turning unstructured data into structured, right? So, all right, you can say, well, web search on your log data, woohoo, you know. Sure, it's super fast. But here's where the real power comes in. I want to be able to do more than just like get a return results. I want to see chart search and values. There's certain sort of fields or numbers that are embedded in the log message. I want to chart those over time. I want to have alerts. I want to select. I basically want to do everything I can do with SQL database, but I want to do it on unstructured data. How do I get to that point, right? So here's an example. So this is a log message from the ESXi hostd. And you'll see there, it says port group, DV port group 5. So that DV port group 553 is an embedded field, right? It basically defines the port group that's being referenced in that particular log message. I would like to turn that into a field, something I can query on, something I can limit to, something I can chart, etc. And we make this possible. We want to make this as easy as possible. We don't want you to have to learn some convoluted, like full, you know, command line syntax to figure out how to do this. You don't want you to be a Linux expert, right? So how does it work? You literally just click and drag and highlight that DV port group 553. You click the extract field button, right? One click, right? And boom, pop, over there goes a new port group field, and now you can query it like a database. Okay, I'm going to let you guys process that for a second. That is so simple, you probably don't even believe it works. Right? Let me repeat that. I click and drag the field that I'm interested in. I press the extract field button. Now I can query that like a database, even though it's unstructured data. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You guys will receive your payment afterwards. It's huge, right? And I should be clear that we are not, we're not creating a database field. This is all done magically, virtually on the fly, right? And it's done fast. But the end result here is that, think about it, end to end now. So remember that whole conversation where I had to sort of call BI and then 3 months later I actually got an answer? Why? Well, they had to go get the data that wasn't actually ingested, and then they had to go do the ETL on it, you know, and then they had to, once the ETL was in there, then they got it wrong, so they go back and fix it again, right? And then eventually they got it into a database schema, and then they had to hire a database expert to actually write the query, and then it was too slow, so they had to go hire an optimizer to optimize it, and then, you know, eventually, and then someone else creates a dashboard over, you get the point, right? With this, you just send all your data to Log Insight, right? And then the person who actually cares knows exactly what he's looking for, clicks and drags what he wants and says, make that a field, and now let me query on it. Huge difference here. Okay, and if that field is a numeric data, right, now, you know, like take example, this one field right here. So I extracted this field, processed 530 bytes, right? Once I've extracted a numeric field, then I can sort of graph functions applied to it. Essentially, I can apply aggregate functions, counts, whatever. And that's where I can start to see charts. So you can really see the power of sort of operating on unstructured data. Now, of course, it's an operation management tool. It's great that it allows you to find that something's gone wrong, really fast. But what's the first thing you do? Okay, I don't want this to happen again, right? Or I want to be the first to know next time instead of the customer calling me. So you want to create an alert. And so any query you construct, you can say, I'd like this to become an alert, and I want to be notified. And, anytime it happens, if it happens more than a certain number of times in the period, and there's an awesome little chart down there that says, hey, that's how many times you would have triggered this alert in the past, right? This is a bad alert, right? It would have triggered every single time period. So I probably need to adjust my period there. So we have some cool UI features like that. Years of vSphere experience. So as I said, we're giving you the great tool, but there's really like the semantics, what's interesting, what you should be looking for. We've provided that for vSphere. So years of vSphere experience packed into a pack. This comes out of the box, and you're going to see more from our partners. We'll hear about that. Talked about sort of the total operational awareness between vSOps and Log Insight. Mahesh referenced it. vSOps is great with numeric metrics telling you something's wrong. Log Insight's great to say, here's why it's wrong, right? So when you install Log Insight, they talk to, and you have vSOps, they'll integrate, they sort of exchange data, they know that they're there. You can do a launch in context. I'm viewing a particular host. Now I want to see the logs relate, or I can say open in Log Insight, but I can also have launch in context, thank you. But I can also send events from Log Insight to vCenter operations, right? So that they can be overlaid on metrics charts like this, or they can be included in root cause analysis on the operational vCenter operations side. Okay, so I have a slide here. Actually, I have one more slide, Log Insight direction. And in fact, everything I've been telling you today is sort of a combination of what we've done and what we're going to do, right? It's really sort of base principles of where we're going. We're just starting to make progress on the statistical analytics, right? The scale out version, we certified the one node version. We're now certifying the multi-node version, right? So it's sort of this is really a whole presentation has been a sort of coverage of what we're doing, what we've done, what's coming kind of stuff. But I just wanted to spend a little bit of time, geeking out a little bit longer before I let you go and return it back to this. And this is a slide I created a while back ago, actually, when I was sort of developing this product. And I said, I think of this as kind of the pyramid of evolution of IT management tools. And you have this sort of complex IT environment that you're looking to manage. And it generates this huge quantity of signals. And sort of at the other end of this funnel is the humans, right, that have to make the decisions, have to look at the data, have to decide what's going wrong. And the reality is they can't look at all that huge quantity of signals, right? So how do they, how do we get it down to a useful, manageable value where, in this case, I guess maybe 2 IT operators, one blue and one green. I'm not quite sure why they're different colors. But anyway, well, here we go. So actually, let me just sort of finish clicking these things through. There we go. So step one, I think of as collection organization. To have that total operational picture, you got to actually have all those signals collected, right? Right now, we do a lot of, because our infrastructure is not really up to the task of having and storing and querying and collecting all that data, we don't. There's just a lot of data we don't collect. We don't collect it in a central way. We don't correlate it because we just don't have the infrastructure to provide that, right? And so that's one of the big investment parts for us is to say, look, we really want to help you. We want to make it so you can collect all that data. You can store all that data, and you can still do something useful with it, right? So that when that failure happens, you don't go, oh, it would have been nice if I had that data. Too bad it cost too much to collect, and I didn't collect it, right? So a lot of the things that we're doing from the technology to our pricing is really about encouraging you to just collect lots of data and not worry about it, right? You don't have to worry about the ETL cost. You don't have to worry about the licensing cost, right? Just the quantity of data. Just get it all in there, and then when you need it, it will be there. But there's also just the technology of getting it in, collecting it, and then organizing it. Really, that's the indexing and all the sort of smart stuff we do to get it organized in a way that we can then search it fast, we can analyze it, get insights fast, etc. Step 2 is understanding. This is where the content packs are coming in, right? The content packs bring the knowledge of what that log data means and what you need to do about it. It's the beginning. But if you think about where we're going in the future, we want to obviously expand that ecosystem as large as possible, embrace as many partners, get community members to create it as well too, and make sure that all the pieces to allow that thing to evolve and be maintained are easy and simple. But there's also integration with external systems. You know, vCenter Operations has knowledge of kind of the structure of your environment. So does vSphere. So does other VMware tools. So do other external tools. We want to bring that understanding into the system and integrate it. Step 3, we talked about it. Statistical analytics, right? Huge piece, I think of. Investment there. And then at the top, sort of, you know, this is kind of the edges of the stuff. The automation, right? When, you know, a lot of times you're going to set up alerts. Says when this alert happens and I want this trigger to happen. We want to take that and even go a step further. And many kinds, we're just going to say, well, we know what's going on. We're going to go fix it for you, right? So I would say that's my vision of the future. And I'm going to, with that, hopefully I've given you a touch of what we're doing. I'm going to pass off back to Mahesh. And yep. Thank you.
Great stuff there. Really excited about this product. And we have here with us Tim Russell from Tim. You want to try the clicker? Might work.
We'll try, see if it works any better for me.
It's not been very cooperative with me. But Tim, can you tell us a little bit about NetApp and what you guys do? You know, there might still be some folks here living under the rocks who don't know what NetApp is about. So
probably very few. But I'll just a quick comment about NetApp. We are a global leader, as most people know, in the storage and data management market. And we've been delivering for customers cost savings, that is in terms of saving money on storage purchases, saving money on operations, and increasing business agility. And part of the way that we've done that over the years is deliver that value in storage through the VMware integration with the VMware ecosystem. So almost 40,000 joint customers with VMware and a 9-year history of integration.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about these customers. Who are they, and typically what kind of problems are you solving for them?
So customers span the spectrum, and you know, sort of foundational to those customers is our clustered data ONTAP core product. And this is what we've illustrated here, which really delivers on the promise of software-defined data center. It enables our customers to virtualize storage services, and this is customers across the spectrum from small customers, service providers, large enterprises. And just to fast forward a little bit, I really got excited about the Log Insight product. Maybe this will date me a little bit, but I remember a time in my career where I was leading a team that was building a modernization system for Space Shuttle, for Space Shuttle mission planning. So this dates me a little bit since Space Shuttle is not flying anymore. But we were getting close to the qualification of that system, and my team realized that we were generating more log data in 24 hours than we could process in 24 hours. And we were building our whole infrastructure of analytics on what's happening in that system on relying on logs. So nowadays we fast forward and we now have a system that we can.
Great, awesome. So just quickly before we jump to the next question, I see a few people already getting ready to leave. There's a couple of really cool things if you hang around for 5 minutes, okay? I promise you, you won't leave this room dissatisfied. So if you hang around for 5 minutes, let's get through this. There's some really cool stuff that we're doing, okay? So going back to the NetApp piece, can you tell us a little bit more about the content pack and what it actually does, Tim?
Yeah, so we have built a content pack. It is now downloadable from the Solution Exchange that gives a series of predefined dashboards that gives you visibility not only into the NetApp storage system, but our integration with the VMware ecosystem. Our vCenter integration through the virtual storage console also generates logs that we can now visualize with a set of predefined dashboards. If we fast forward a bit here, okay, one more. So I'm going to give a couple examples of some of the dashboards that we included. So the first one gives you an operational view. So this might be a administrator, VI administrator, that wants to monitor and make sure that the health and status and performance of their overall ecosystem built on NetApp is performing as expected. here in this example, we're showing data transfers, replication to a remote data center. We're showing that we're doing local backups or snapshot copies. And we also show that we're moving data inside of the NetApp cluster to capacity balance and performance balance. And the administrator in one dashboard can see that the system is running as expected, there's no performance implications, and all of those operations are being performed as expected. The next dashboard maybe is one that would be used by an administrator to do more deep analytics or root cause analysis. So here we're showing a variety of statistics about what's happening in the system down to the storage level, all the way up to the host level, and giving a view of the events that are happening so that the administrator can quickly see that the storage system is operating as expected, but there's some anomaly that we're experiencing at the application layer. So let's go dig into the application layer, and we can avoid the time normally taken to dig down into every element of the system.
Fantastic. So if I am a joint customer of VMware running my virtualized infrastructure on NetApp storage, where would I go? What would I do to get this content pack today? And what are the cool stuff are you guys doing in the future?
So you can download the content pack, which has these predefined dashboards as well as predefined fields that you can do your own customization from the VMware Exclusion Exchange. We also, on communities.netapp.com, you can get more information about not only the Log Insight content pack, but the rest of the NetApp solutions around VMware. I also let you in on, because you're attending here, a little preview, that we are about to announce a contest to create content packs for our virtual storage console. This is the integration with vSphere. And so if you look forward to and watch us on communities.netapp.com, we'll be announcing this contest shortly. And I'm giving you only the preview here so that you can get up to speed on download the content pack and get familiar with the predefined fields that are there.
All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Tim Russell from NetApp. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you.
And so for the patient amongst you, a couple of things really. We have these content packs across all of these other partners as well in the ecosystem. This thing is going to double, triple, quadruple very soon. These content packs are supremely easy to develop. You can, as a operator, work on these as well, or go to Solutions Exchange and get these content packs. Now for the fun stuff. Number one, just to tie this all out, what we're trying to do with cloud management is to get you visibility from apps down into infrastructure, leveraging both structured, unstructured data, leveraging dynamic thresholding, behavior learning, and core analytics, fundamental to that tooling, right? Number two, it's about reducing the complexity, making sure that the tool you have does not turn out to be a monster or an exercise in learning. So leverage our intelligence so you can actually get your job done. This is unlike other tools that require you to learn some arcane languages to get stuff done. Okay? Now for the good stuff that I promised you, follow us on Twitter at VMLogInsight. You do that, there's something which is going to be announced, tweeted tomorrow. Attend Carl's session, that's the biggest clue I can give, and you will walk away happy. Okay? So make sure you follow us at this Twitter handle, and I promise you, you'll go back to your offices, to your data centers, and you'll be playing with something new and shiny. Okay? Last thing, and again, thanks for staying back. There are free t-shirts available here. Wear them proudly. They're all large sizes, so if you're small, grab hold of another small person, and two of you can fit in one of them. Okay? Thank you. Have fun.